Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now today we're testing Borderlands 4 on my modest, I like to call it a budget gaming PC. It has an i5-12400F and an RTX 4060 along with 32 gigs of 3200 MHz DDR4. So it's nothing special, but it can play most new games relatively problem free, providing I'm realistic with my expectations. And speaking of which, didn't the boss man for Borderlands 4 say something along those lines, that we should be realistic about expectations? You know, I read that and thought, oh boy, yeah, this is going to perform absolutely terribly. But let's take a look. First, the minimum specs. So we're looking at a suggested i7-9700F or 2700X for the minimum, along with a 2070, 5700 XT or ARC A580. There's actually a note down here that says this requires 8 CPU cores for a processor. So we have six cores with the i5 and 12 threads. So we'll see how it goes. For the recommended requirements here, a 12700 or Ryzen 5800X, a 3080, 6800 XT or B580. It doesn't say anything about an 8-core CPU in this section, but I assume that the same applies. So this is running on what? Unreal Engine 5 now. We've also got Denuvo. So it's a brilliant combination, compiling shaders as most games do these days. At least we're getting almost 60 FPS here, so if nowhere else, it's a good start in terms of frame rate. Alright, so here we are in game. This is the opening level, and I want to talk about something I quickly found out regarding the settings and upscaling. So I've started off with the lowest, basically everything set to low, turned down as far as possible, apart from upscaling. Now, I did start with upscaling completely off, but I found that you're better off enabling some form of upscaling and just setting it to full resolution, as this will give you higher performance. At least it does on this system. So I set it to DLSS, but full resolution, and we got at least 60 FPS in this initial example. Now, this is going to be applicable for other upscaling methods as well, but watch when we disable upscaling altogether. So we're still running at 1920 by 1080 natively, but now we're getting less than 60 frames per second. So I found that turning upscaling on, even at native resolution, is going to perform better than turning it off completely at native resolution. If we enable FSR as an example now, maintain full resolution, again, plus 60 FPS, but when we have it off entirely, we're losing like 6 to 8 frames per second. I'll give you another example, TSR here. This doesn't perform as well, but it's still better than having upscaling disabled altogether. Less than 60 frames per second now. Even XESS gives us plus 60 FPS, albeit set once again to full resolution here. So I decided that, considering I'm using a 4060, that we would move forward with DLSS. Of course, I started with native or full res, and then we worked our way down from there as the video progressed. But let's get into it. So this is like the opening level here, not much going on screen. The CPU usage is actually quite intensive. I can see why they suggested an 8-core CPU. I did notice moments today whereby our CPU utilization was hitting at least 90%, even though the RTX 4060 was the limitation most of the time. I mean, this thing's going to be pegged at 99, 100% usage pretty much all of the time today. In this opening level here, with not much going on screen, the exact performance figures will be up on screen as well, but we're seeing plus 60 frames per second, and here things are running pretty smooth with the occasional dip and drop. Alright, so this is like the second level. It's called Coastal Bonescape. Here, again, we're still using DLSS full resolution with the lowest in-game settings, and we look to be averaging around 60 frames per second, but here it's quite problematic in terms of dips and drops, or at least more problematic than it was in that opening level. This is where things start to get a little more inconsistent. There's a lot going on screen now. We're running with the lowest settings, still utilizing DLSS at full resolution, and as you can see by the frame time graph and FPS overlay, we aren't hitting 60 frames per second nearly as often as we were beforehand. But I think this was to be expected as we progressed through the level. Keep an eye on that CPU usage as well, because as I mentioned before, this will just randomly like jump up to 85-90%. Let's move away from the lowest in-game settings and turn the visual preset up to medium. Now, of course, we're also going to implement some upscaling here. I decided to go with DLSS balanced. I think this should still give us 60 frames per second, so DLSS balanced here with the medium in-game preset and nothing else changed. This should also make the game look a lot better, but just looking at it, and it's hard to believe that there are such performance issues when you take the visuals into consideration. The thing is, the visuals I'm seeing on screen and the performance, it doesn't seem to line up. Don't get me wrong, I do really appreciate the art style of these games. It's looking at it and you think, yeah, it shouldn't run quite like this. We should be getting a lot more performance from it. That said, with the medium preset and DLSS balance, the game still looks pretty good. We're still in the coastal bonescape level here, averaging about 70 frames per second this time around, but as you can see there are still a lot of dips and drops. I'm thinking a change of CPU would probably help alleviate some of these problems, but I wanted to stick with this entry level chip because I'm always praising it and I think it's still a great choice in 2025. I think it's a CPU, just like the Ryzen 5600, that a lot of people are going to be looking at, seeing the price and thinking, yeah, do you know what, that's not a bad start to a sensibly priced gaming setup. Let's turn things up a notch. We'll go with the high preset this time around, but of course that does mean we're going to have to make more of a sacrifice to the DLSS upscaling quality level. I'm going to go with performance. I don't think we'll have to use ultra performance, though we will test that later on. I tend to stay away from frame generation in videos like this. I just think, it's not really an accurate idea of actual performance. It's just increases the perceived smoothness or whatever, and considering we're going to need a consistent 60 FPS in order to make that feel half decent, it's probably not going to work all that great here, especially as you can see with the high preset and DLSS performance. We're getting around about 60 FPS again with a few dips and drops here and there. Now DLSS performance here doesn't look too bad at all. I take it this is using DLSS 4 because even at performance mode it still looks pretty sharp, pretty crisp overall, and can't complain really. As I said before, I do appreciate the art style. I really like how these Borderlands games look, but you look at the visuals, then you look at the performance and think, should be getting more, but I'm sure there will be patches and stuff like that. I always like to try and remain positive with things like this, but it's always nice when these things are sorted before release. Never mind. Hands up, I am using a 6-core processor. It says 8 cores in Steam, and I'm using 6. So make of that what you will. I'd actually stick to medium, to be honest. We will finalise though with a high preset and DLSS ultra performance, so this is probably upscaling from like 360p, somewhere around there. Again, in the same coastal bonescape level here, or Riptide Grotto as you can see at the top of the screen. This does improve things quite a bit, 73 frames per second with the ultra performance DLSS mode and the high preset on an i5 and a 4060. This actually feels a lot more consistent to play, so I'm thinking around 70 FPS as an average, and while the exact figures are up on screen, I think you're going to see quite a bit of improvement from the percentile lows. At this point as well, the 8 gigs of VRAM starts to sort of disappear, but I think it's more of a CPU related issue regarding the stutters and drops that I'm seeing here. That's just talking from my experience with this game so far. The usage and utilization is all over the place, so the more powerful your CPU, the better experience you're going to have in Borderlands 4. But I think as far as the 4060 goes, yeah, that's certainly capable of running this game if you want to use low settings, or medium with DLSS, perhaps high if you really want to turn up the DLSS upscaling preset. But my recommendation with hardware like this would have to be the medium preset, DLSS balanced, and you're going to have hopefully an okay time. But we'll see how things change and progress over the course of the next few weeks as we will hopefully get a few more updates. As for this one though, thanks for watching. Let me know below how the game runs for you and what specs you're using in your system. And as always, I hope to see you all in the next one.